That's enough. Now's not the time to point fingers. Since we're in a tight situation now, what everyone needs to do is help one another out and ride out the storm together, not grab each other by the throat. Old Mr. Nicholson yelled after witnessing Florence's burst of rage. Easy for you to say. This is the Hummersman we're talking about. Who knows, all of us might go bankrupt in a couple of days and no longer have a place to call home in Swinton anymore. Florence snapped in fury. That's right. If it wasn't for Dustin, who kept stirring up trouble and dragging us down with him, how could the Nicholsons even have ended up in this situation today? James spoke, and the rest agreed with him. What's going on, Dustin? I believe that you can enlighten all of us here? Dahlia suddenly piped up. She was giving him a chance to explain himself properly. Tina was unruly and unreasonable, which is why I decided to put her in her place, Dustin replied bluntly. See, everyone heard that, right? He beat up the girl first, so he was the one who instigated this whole thing in the first place. So, he's entirely to blame for the ban on the Nicholson family. Florence shouted even more fiercely. You're a thorn in our sides, Dustin. You owe us an explanation for every affliction you've caused all of us. I suggest kidnapping him and handing him over to the Hummers so that we can quell their rage. A bunch of chatter erupted from the crowd, and it could be seen that most of them were in favor of kidnapping him. You are too impulsive, Dustin. Do you even know who Ms. Hummer is? What makes you think you're worthy of going head-to-head with her? Do you know how much trouble you've caused? Dahlia scoffed with a frown. So what you're telling me is that I should have just sat there and watched as you got brutally beaten up and humiliated? Dustin sneered coldly. It didn't matter if Florence and the others didn't understand, but if Dahlia still insisted on pinning the blame on him, then he'd feel that all his efforts were for nothing. Don't you twist my words. I am trying to tell you to consider the consequences first before doing 19 anything. Not only did you get us into trouble, you even hurt your reputation in the process. Dahlia retorted with a scowl on her face. I'm not the type to dwell on the details. All I know is that I'll get revenge on anyone who crosses me. Dustin said in a cold voice. You guys heard it yourself. This kid is still as stubborn as ever. Thus, we must hand him over to the Hummers. Florence instigated as she gestured at two of the younger Nicholsons. The two immediately understood her intention and placed their hands on each side of Dustin's shoulders. You'd better be more cooperative with us, or else you'll get what's coming to you. Dustin frowned and was ready to pounce on them when Jules suddenly burst into the room with a panicked look on her face. This is bad, Auntie. The Hummers have brought their men here to kill us all what? A collective gasp arose from everyone in the room as the news startled them. They thought it was already bad that the whole family got banned, but they never expected the Hummers to be this cruel. They were already knocking at their doors. Were they trying to drive them into a corner? It's over, it's over. We're dead meat this time. How could this happen? Why can't the Hummers give us a break for once? The crowd panicked and started jumping to their feet anxiously. It's all because of that damn bastard. It's all his fault. That's right. The Hummers must have come for Dustin, so let's hand him over and we'll be all right. Everyone in the crowd immediately turned their gazes to Dustin, causing a million laser-like glares to land on him at the same time. In their opinion, if they could sacrifice Dustin to save themselves, that would be the best course of action. Just as the crowd was still in an uproar, a group of people from the Hummer family started boldly entering the venue. The leader of the procession was Tina, who was sitting in a wheelchair. Following behind her were a few representatives from the Hummer family, as well as a few escorting bodyguards. At the time, Tina looked weak, as her eyes were half shut and half open. Both of her hands and feet were in casts, her entire face was bruised and swollen, and her features seemed to have been disfigured completely. If someone were not closely acquainted with her, they would have a hard time telling between her current and actual looks. MMS Hummer? The crowd let out a gasp. Everyone from the Nicholsons was taken aback as they stared at the nearly paralyzed and disfigured Tina. Although they knew that she'd gotten her ass beaten, they didn't expect it to be that bad. Her face had swelled up so much that it almost resembled a pig's head. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that the young, spoiled to the core lady of the Hummer family would even live to see such a day. Wasn't this Dustin fellow too much for doing that though? Dustin, don't tell me you were the one who beat Ms. Hummer up this badly? One of the Nicholsons asked shakily as he looked at the others in shock. Rhys! You'd better admit everything by your own choice later and not drag us into this. Florence shouted as she broke into a nervous sweat. The situation was much direr than she had anticipated. James went straight to the point. After walking 3 steps forward, he immediately fell to his knees with a loud thud in front of the Hummers. The inertia generated by his fall caused his torso to slide forward by a few inches. Ms. Hummer, this has nothing to do with us. It was Dustin Rhys who beat you up, so if you want to plot your revenge, please just plot it on his head. Please spare our family. James pleaded in desperation. Upon witnessing this, the majority of the Nicholsons unanimously approved of his actions on the inside. They admired him for his humble and responsible nature and thought of him as one of the good men in the Nicholson family. He was probably the type to rush forward in the face of danger too. They were certain that the Nicholson family would continue to thrive and prosper, what with such an outstanding individual in the family. A collective gasp arose from the people from the Hummers. When they all saw James kneel on the floor, some of them exchanged glances with one another, completely dumbfounded by what had just happened in front of them. Shouldn't they be the ones apologizing? How come it's the other way around now? What the hell was happening now? I suppose you must be mistaken about something, kid? The butler of the Hummer family asked with perplexed look on his face. Even though he had imagined countless horrible scenarios that could come out of this wasn't in his predictions at all. Oh right, before the butler could finish his sentence, James immediately assumed that the butler wasn't planning on letting them go. He turned around and started flailing his hands in the air. Someone, anyone, bring Dustin to me. I'll get him to bow down to the Hummers and beg for their forgiveness. I'll do it myself, Dustin said, shaking off the two men before he trudged forward. Everyone! That's him! He's the one who beat her up, James shouted while pointing at Dustin. When the Hummers finally saw what had unfolded in front of their eyes, their expressions changed dramatically and all of them fell to their knees with a loud thud.